G'day, I'm Mark from Self Sufficient Me, and Nina and I recently conducted an experiment whereby we ate only what we could grow ourselves from our self-sufficient property. I'm not going to BS you and say it was easy. I lost a significant amount of weight, but I never went hungry. I had plenty to eat, but I did get bored. Then in week 3, one of us couldn't go on. You saw 21 Days the trailer. Well, I hope you did. This is 21 Days the movie. Let's get into it. Firstly, let's rehash the setup and rules. The participants in this was Nina and myself. We didn't have the boys because I didn't think it was fair. I chose this time of year to run this 21-day experiment because it happened to be a bad time. And I wanted to test ourselves, or our food production, not when it was easy, but when it was harder. Many of our crops are still developing. Potatoes and sweet potatoes are out of season, making standard carbs scarce. As far as protein from meat goes, well, that was a big Roy Orbison. We've got chickens, but they're laying chickens. They're not meant for meat. We have 2 ducks, and at the moment she's too young and I don't even know if she's fertile. And we also have quail that we keep for meat, and we could have used them in an emergency, but they're our breeding stock and it's winter time at the moment, and that means that the quail have a rest through this time of year and stop breeding. We also didn't allow ourselves things like sugar in beverages. I mean, we don't grow sugar cane and we don't have honeybees, so we didn't allow ourselves to eat honey either. I do think it would have been fair to allow sugar if we used it as a preserve from our own food, such as jam, but we didn't end up using our jams anyway. Thought maybe it'd be a good idea if we just went away from sugar completely during this experiment. No dairy, no milk, cheese, alcohol or bread, unless it was cornbread made with our own corn. Apart from that, there was none of those simple carbs allowed in our diet. I'm going to break this video down into 3 simple parts: the withdrawal, the boredom, and lessons learnt. And I'm also going to be interviewing Nina throughout this video and letting her give her side of the story and her side of the experience, because it's going to be slightly different to mine. And just a heads up, Nina is a bit reluctant to get in front of the camera and she hasn't read these questions in advance. So what you see and hear are her candid responses. The first thing I noticed was the habitual side of things. Going to the fridge, going to the cupboard, pantry, being able to sort of eat what you want. I'd had to check myself several times, reaching for something and then, hang on, I'm on an experiment here. Now, I can put my hand on my heart and say, we never cheated throughout the experiment. But I really got close several times. Sugar withdrawal was another major milestone we had to get over. For me, I didn't really notice it initially, but Nina did in me, and I put it down to the mood swings. She reckons my demeanour changed a little bit, you know, not significantly. I didn't turn into a madman or anything like that, but and then when I reflected on it, I did understand where she was coming from. I was restless and I wondered why. I was drinking my coffees, albeit without milk and sugar, which was awful, until someone shared a trick about adding orange juice to the coffee, which sweetened it up a little bit and made it much more tolerable. But let's be real, no sugar gave me mood swings and I wasn't liking it at all. How did you feel during week 1 at the start of this experiment?
Awful. The first 3 days I had a headache. I think it was just because of the lack of sugar. So going from sugar-free diet. Can I start again? Can I start again?
No, you can just keep going. And then I'll cut it in pieces that's more tolerable.
Okay.
So you can say it again if you want.
Okay. Oh, it was bloody awful. The first 3 days I actually literally had a headache, and it wasn't like, it was just one of those, it was like a caffeine withdrawal, but we were drinking coffee. It was just because of sugar and carbs withdrawal. and I felt really lethargic. And then after the 3 days, I felt really good. Felt lighter with it. I didn't actually crave sugar, and then we started getting into it.
For me, I could go cold turkey on coffee and it wouldn't worry me at all. And I don't tend to get headaches if I get hungry, or if I miss out on my coffees, I might get a bit moody or something like that, or tongue for one, but I don't get any physical problems. It wasn't until the end of the first week that I myself realised, and Nina reckons, that we started feeling the detox leave go and the withdrawal symptoms fade away. So that's not that long, really. To get over something that can really grip people, which is like a sugar addiction or even a caffeine addiction, I felt that it was pretty good going to get rid of those feelings towards the end of that first week. And then at the start of that second week, I was feeling really good. I was starting to lose quite a bit of weight, trimming down, felt lighter, felt less bloated, felt happier. It's hard to describe, but I just felt healthier all over. And so did Nina.
Did week 2 get better or worse for you?
No, week 2 I sort of started getting a bit of a pattern, and with the proteins and the vegetables, and making new meals with the jicama.
Jicama?
Jicama? Is it jicama or jicama?
Oh, well, I always thought jicama. Now you got my problem.
Is it jicama or jicama? I don't know.
Jicama.
It's jicama.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spelled jicama.
Yeah. And then we started getting into week 3. Did I make it week 3?
Well, that's a question coming up later on. This is week 2.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So week 3, oh, it was the first couple of days, wasn't it? I pulled out of week 3.
No, don't answer that just yet. Did week 2 get better or worse for you? That's the question.
At the start of week 2, I would say it was okay. By the end of week 2, I was just feeling lethargic. I felt like I really needed protein. Although we're sharing eggs, we just didn't have enough for both of us. Actually, thank you that you gave me the eggs. But, oh gee whiz, I felt very tired, and I put in some long hours at work, so I find that I need that extra protein fix. I was sort of going more the coffees, but without milk or sugar. That was just awful. So, a double shot of coffee, and it was just, I felt like it was medicine than just enjoying the coffee itself.
We had a reasonable amount and variety of food, but eating from our own backyard still became repetitive. And in desperation, I prematurely cut down a bunch of bananas so that I could ripen them early and get a natural carb and sweetness hit. I even made fried banana chips out of green bananas, and they were surprisingly good. In a modern society, we're spoilt for choice, and I think that's a good thing because it means humanity has progressed, and we're blessed with having access to eat almost anything we want at any time. But there are negative aspects to this easy access to food, such as overindulgence. Too much of a good or bad thing can affect us in a negative ways, such as weight gain and, just become unhealthy. Also, complacency can make us vulnerable to suffering more when times suddenly get tough. I think the statisticians say we're less than 2 weeks away from running out of food if our supply lines get disrupted or cut. So in that context, being bored with not able to eat what I want, such as an avocado out of season because they're imported at this time of year, is really a big whoop-de-doo in the whole scheme of things. But I do have to be honest and say I got really bored. What made it worse was how we all weren't on this experiment. Our 2 boys stayed eating as normal because of school, development, etc. And we thought it wouldn't be right to restrict the boys' diet. But we still had to prepare their meals. And it was hard to cook up all this good food that we weren't allowed to eat. It was like torture.
Okay, what happened in week 3 when you had to semi-drop out of the experiment?
Well, it was pretty hard because I felt like I was going to let you down. But in hindsight, I sort of needed that protein and just to continue on, because I started exercising as well. And so once I just sort of went, you know, this is not for me. It is with the vegetables and fruit, but I just needed an extra protein here and there for our meals, and I could definitely survive with that.
Yep.
In that last week when Nina semi-dropped out, I won't deny it, I began to stay away from the family at meal times because it was getting unbearable to watch and smell everyone else eating what they wanted. So what I would do is wait for their dinner to be done and then slink upstairs when everything was done and cleaned up and make my own dinner for that last week. Sit there on my Pat Malone, eating my rabbit food with maybe an egg crushed over the top. But yeah, that's how life was for that last week.
If you could name one thing that you really missed the most, what would that be?
Milk.
Milk?
For my coffee.
Oh.
I'd say milk, and then of course a steak.
Right.
A steak, chicken,
So beef.
both. Beef.
Beef as in the protein beef.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah.
Is what you crave.
I was craving a big T-bone steak.
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, that's interesting because so was I.
I think one of the biggest lessons learnt out of this for me is if we can live off our own property now at the worst time of year, before things are starting to ripen, like these tomatoes are still green, we haven't had many red tomatoes at all over this last month, then I'm confident that we'll do it easy when we have plenty of food growing and lots to harvest and preserve. Speaking of preserving, we didn't have a lot of preserve in reserve, which was another mistake. We need a lot more preserved food. Dried food, not just herbs and spices, but also dried fruits. That'd be a big bonus. Canned foods, a lot more different types of pickles. We ran out of pickles, we ran out of tomatoes. Luckily we had plenty of nuts that were preserved, so that was a big plus and a positive thing about preserving. I really didn't realise just how handy those pecan nuts were. They would become one of our major oil and protein and fat sources for brain power, for flavouring food, and also an excellent snack. It's not like we don't preserve much, but I think what happens is we tend to use them up. We go through them pretty quickly because they are usually quite nice, like a sauerkraut or preserved tomatoes. Maybe we just need to make sure we make more of them and maybe not give too many away.
What would be your top 3 lessons learned during this experiment, and what would you do to make it easier next time?
Preparation. Heaps of prep. So heaps of preservatives, making sure, although you had those fermented tomatoes, which I loved in that garlic,
Yep.
but just abundance of extra stuff that we could have just, with all our extra produce,
Yep.
we really need to plan. I mean, this is a great time of the year for us as well, so we didn't go without. It's just that the variety was limited. It's only what we've got in season. We could always prep, and that would have been better.
One thing we did find on a positive was how much money we saved by not buying the excess protein. So Nina and I will usually buy a protein from the store. We'll skip the fresh food department, like the veggies and fruit, because we don't usually need that, and we will just go and grab a protein, maybe some steaks, some chicken, fish or something like that, and then we will use the veggies and fruit from our own yard and herbs and spices to create that meal. And because there was 2 less mouths to feed, you know how expensive protein can be when you buy it from the supermarket or even the markets or the store, the butcher who grows it locally. You know, those things we love to do, but it is an expensive exercise, even to buy those treats like different types of cheeses, which I so dearly love, dairy food, which I also love a lot of. Those boutique stores, we love to visit them and buy, but it is expensive. And because we weren't doing that for those 3 weeks, we estimated we saved at least, and I'm being conservative here, $100 a week on just us two not eating those extra things. The social aspects, I touched on before how I was moving away from the family and eating at different times. Well, that is a real negative for us. We like to sit around and have a family meal, and that was starting to go awry in that last week, and I don't like that. None of us liked it, so I'm glad we're back to normal now. What we could do in an emergency is we still could have harvested some of the poultry that we had, but we need to get smarter with that as well, and I need to plan ahead. I've got some eggs in the incubator now, duck eggs. That's fine for another 30 days time or so when they hatch out. If you followed me for a long time, you'd know we can't keep larger animals here. We might be able to keep one goat or a horse. Not that we're going to eat a horse, of course, our neighbours have horses. But you know what I mean, we can't keep pigs. We could keep one pig, but I think that'd be cruel. You'd want to keep 2 pigs so at least you could breed them. You're not allowed to on this property here. That is some restrictions that we had to live with and that many of you guys would have to live with as well. Perhaps you can't even keep many poultry. At least we've got not many restrictions on how many birds we can keep. But again, when it comes to our own poultry, there could have been more forethought there. We could have been preserving our meat. We could have been harvesting those birds and then putting them in the freezer and using them for a time when we needed to. Natural fats was something that I hadn't thought of at all, and this is something that is incredibly important for your brain. Fats in the diet, I think, is a little underrated and we should pay more attention to. It was good that we had the nuts because that helped me especially. Nina and myself, we started craving oils and fats, things like avocados, which gives you that natural oil. Omega-3s that you'd usually get through fish. I was able to get quite a bit of iron out of the kale, but I think in a situation like this, it'd be more helpful if we had preserved some fats, either oils or animal fats, so that we could utilize them in our cooking and get them into our diet just for the brain.
I want you to be totally frank here. Do you think this experiment was worthwhile?
Oh, definitely. It showed that we could actually live off the property that we've got.
Yep.
It showed some strengths and weaknesses, and the weaknesses is that, you know, that we underestimated being winter with our chickens with laying.
Yep.
And it showed us all the shortfalls and all the things of the lessons learnt that we need to actually build on. And I really enjoyed it coming back, even if I came back from work, that I could actually just go, okay, what am I having for dinner? And it'd actually take a bit of time prepping, but I enjoyed it mentally, coming back off the train from work, coming in there, looking at what I'm going to prep, and it was a nice little stress relief. And I think that's what I really enjoyed the most.
Well, that is interesting. Okay, cool.
We had some beautiful discoveries and surprises. For the first time I tried, and Nina tried, fermented tomatoes. We fermented them, and then to slow down the process, we put them in the fridge and kept them there for a time when we really needed them. And it just so happened that we could utilize those tomatoes, which were still look like a fresh tomato, albeit a little squishy. But by jingoes, as my grandfather would say, they were tasty as, and Nina loved them. She loved the saltiness and the fermented sourness that the fermentation process brought out in those tomatoes. So that was just one example of how we were forced by this experiment to find new things to make and eat out of what we grew here. As far as fruit goes, we had plenty of citrus. We didn't have mangoes because they're not in season, or berries, or a lot of those other fruits that we typically get through spring and through summer. Regardless, we had heaps of citrus like oranges, grapefruit, limes, lemons, and with the amount of fruit that I actually ate, weight loss for me was a huge surprise because I ended up losing over 10 kilos. That's 22 pounds, and that was without even feeling hungry or having a rumbling tummy. In fact, I ate a lot of sugar in the form of citrus such as oranges, and in that last week, those bananas that I harvested and hung up in the shed were ripening. So I reckon I ate almost half a bunch of bananas in that last week as well, and still lost weight. Actually, I ate so many bananas that I thought I might turn into one. Imagine that, the human banana.
And then we'll finish off with, is there anything else you'd like to add? Not really. You've probably said it all.
Yeah. Just highlighting preservative, using our dehydrator.
Yeah.
We've got obviously a freezer that that I inherited, and just making the most of it when we have abundance of food. I know that we give a lot away to friends and family, and of course our chickens eat the extra lettuce and so forth. But just planning for it. Yeah, and the good thing about it was that I did lose a couple of kgs.
Yep.
But I would probably like to have a pig or a goat or something like that.
Yeah.
But that'd be a good mission for you or project for you, maybe.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, thanks for that. You did very well.
Oh.
Thanks for your participation. And I think you should finish off with a big Self-Sufficient Me thumbs up. Let me zoom in on that thumb. Okay, cool. Well done. Cut.
It's been nearly a week since I finished the experiment, and how am I feeling now? Well, I've got to be honest with you and say that I felt really great straight after the 21 days because I'd lost a lot of weight and I was just feeling really good. But now, getting back into eating some bread and some more carbs, a bit of pasta here and there, I actually feel a little bloated, even now, and I haven't had a lot to eat today. And this tells me I need to be careful not to overload on carbs. I think they're fine in moderation, but now I think carbs, both simple and complex, but especially the simple, such as sugars and pasta and breads, should be kept to a minimum and certainly not dominate the diet. More proteins and more fresh, complex carbohydrates, such as those found in fresh fruit and veg, I think is a better balance for me and probably for most people. The thing about eating mostly from your own backyard is the planning process that you have to go through. You have to plan your food instead of being lazy and eating what is convenient. It's easier to get a TV dinner out of the fridge or buy a takeaway, but I can tell you it's not as fun. It's much more fun making your own food, getting creative and growing it in your own backyard. And that's what I want to do even more of now. I could keep going on and on, but the bottom line is we learnt so much out of this experiment. And now I'm keener than ever to apply these lessons learnt in a practical way and improve on what we have already. I really got a lot out of spending 21 days growing only what we can eat from our own self-sufficient property. I didn't do this to demonstrate how we could live without requiring food from elsewhere, because I don't believe in that. I love how society shares food through retail and the community. It gives us more choice and more wonderful foodie experiences to enjoy. No, what I wanted was this experiment to bring out how prepared we were, already we were, in case the world turned to custard and we had to go into a lockdown and fend for ourselves. Would we be able to do it? And the answer is, yes, we can, albeit uncomfortably, but it was still possible even at one of the less convenient times of the year. This gives me a ton of confidence and reassurance. However, this experiment did expose some gaps in our self-sufficiency and things that we could do much better, and I intend to use this information to improve our self-sufficiency overall. By the way, I'll be uploading a heap of recipes on my other channel, Self-Sufficient Me Too, so make sure you subscribe over there. Many of those recipes will be from this 21-day experiment. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a big self-sufficient thumbs up. And let's see if we can get this video to 21,000 thumbs up. Do you think that's a little bit excessive? Do you think that's achievable? I hope so, because that would be 1,000 thumbs up per day of torture and misery that Nina and I went through. No, it wasn't that bad, to be honest. But it would be nice to get that many thumbs up. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and share the video around, because that helps a lot. Bye for now. Cheers. Mm.